What's up, guys? I'm Steven.
And I'm Will. And this is the Post P Chronicles.
So, Will, what do we got today?
We have an amazing story for you guys today. An amazing story coming all the way from Los Angeles. Bosco. Bosco, welcome, man.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Not for sure, man. Appreciate it. So, this is Post P Chronicles, man. Tell us your story, man. How was your childhood? Tell us about it.
Childhood. It was good.
All right.
It was good. To me, it was good. To some other people, it might have not been a good childhood, but to me, it was good.
So where you from?
I'm from Los Angeles. Grew up in South Los Angeles, Compton, that area. So I grew up in that culture, so to speak. You know, that lifestyle.
Right.
Now, real quick, you're 47, so what years were you growing up in Compton?
In the 80s.
So that's when it was wild and popping off and hip-hop was making songs about it.
Yeah.
80s.
So the 80s was, everything was wild about the 80s, right?
Yeah.
You had
Crack in the
hip-hop,
80s.
rap taking off then, NWA, crack, gang banging, everything, right?
That
the Cold
was your
War.
childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Like high rates of unemployment, South Los Angeles.
High crime rate.
Yeah, high crime rate due to the gangs and the drugs and the unemployment at that time. It was South LA was
It was tough,
it was
to say the least.
Yeah, it was wild then.
And that was your childhood.
Yeah, but if you don't know anything else, you have nothing to compare it to.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to you.
I don't know that.
A lot of action growing up.
Yeah, it's not until you get out of it and you experience other things and you see that life is different that you realize that your childhood might have been abnormal or a bit dysfunctional, you know.
So tell us about your childhood. What are some of those abnormal, dysfunctional, or what you may have considered to be good about your childhood growing up?
Just the way I think the way I responded to trauma to me from things that I experienced and saw as a kid, that bit of trauma didn't affect me as it would other kids. So I normalized gang banging. I normalized selling drugs. I normalized drive-by shootings. I normalized being arrested and chased by the police. I normalized being beat by the police. Like you hear about it now. You see how, you know, with Black Lives Matter today, a lot of people, you know, anti-police, and that was the 80s, and a lot of people today, it seems like you would think that it's something new. But I think when I grew up, police brutality was much worse back then. But the difference is that we normalized it. It was part of growing up. Like if you ran from the cops, you know, you had ass whooping coming, and I had that coming. You didn't complain about it. It was normalized. You know what I'm saying?
That's what happens when you run.
Yeah, you didn't go out and protest. You're like, that was coming. We know that's what's going to happen. I think now people tend to think that it's something that shouldn't happen and it's something that's shocking. But the trauma back then is we believed that it was something that happened and it should happen. So it's like
Something
we
to be
accepted
expected.
this shit, you know?
Yeah.
So I think the 80s was crazy when you look at it now, but at the time it was normal and it was fun.
They were making hip-hop songs about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you would think that it's okay.
Yeah.
So this is your childhood. We're growing up in the 80s. Where does this lead you to? Because I don't want to assume, but man, all the gangs, all the drugs, all this whole lifestyle, it had to have attached itself to you at some point. Where did this lead you?
It leads where it's only two places it leads.
Only two places.
And what are those two places?
Only two. And I see you still here. So.
Yeah, so
I
it's
can guess one of them.
Yeah.
It's prison. So it led to me spending most of my life behind bars.
So let's go to the first time you spent some time behind bars. I think you said you were 10, 11 years old the first time you was arrested.
Yeah, the first time I was arrested, I was either 10 or 11, and it was for stealing a bike. It was actually a trap, you know. Cops actually set a bike out.
A bait bike.
A
I didn't
bait
know they
bike,
did it
yeah.
back then. I see
That
that
was
now.
That was legal back then, right? Bait bites.
Yeah.
They still
Bait
do that
cars?
now, like bait cars.
I
They
thought
do that
that's
now.
illegal now because that's called entrapment, right?
They do that now. I've seen
Oh,
them
do
doing
they?
it now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Put all a bunch of cameras inside the cars and yeah.
So when you're stealing a bike at 11 years old, you're getting arrested for it. You're like, this is just the norm. That's what happens in Compton.
Yeah, I was actually in Long Beach at the time. We left Compton, a bunch of us. It was about like 5 of us. We ventured across into Long Beach. North Long Beach borders Compton. And so we ventured across into North Long Beach. Probably like 5 little kids from Compton, black kids. We walking through. At the time, North Long Beach was predominantly white. So we ventured over there. We used to go over there and like ride bikes, and it was like a little sewer canal. We go over there and play over there. And we went over there and was loitering and saw a bike sitting out. Tried to hop on the bike. The chain kept coming off. And all of a sudden, a bunch of cops swooped up on us. And a white guy came screaming, "That's my bike. They stole my bike." They took us to jail, and the same guy came back there with a badge on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was the first time I was actually arrested and taken to jail. Then I was arrested again later on for selling drugs. And
What age did the drug dealing start?
the drug dealing started around the same age, about 11.
What drug was it back then?
First drug I sold was marijuana.
Got it.
Then it went on to crack.
So that was 11, 12, 13. I believe you said 14 was the first time you went to prison, the California Youth Authority. Is that right?
Yeah, I went to California Youth Authority at 14
What was
And,
that for?
for robbery.
Now, me and Will had a discussion this week that
Yeah.
YA, they thought YA was something good back then. And, he went to YA, right?
No, I never
Or
been
you
to
didn't,
YA.
but the
No, I
kids
never-
that go to YA,
Right.
usually it just perpetuates what they're doing and gets worse, right? YA is not exactly help anyone out to do better. Once they go to YA, it's like, okay, now it's just the next step in going downhill to eventually prison, right? How was YA for you?
Well, you got to look at as a parent, what is your major concern about a child? Because you can do everything you want to raise a child and make sure your child does the right thing. But there's something that's a bigger influence than you a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
and that's peer pressure, your peers. So it's who you hang around as a child. So imagine being 14 years old and you're confined to an environment with nothing but bad guys.
That's YA.
Yeah, that's why. There's no productive people. Why? You take and you got to look at California Youth Authority was the last step for a juvenile. Like you had camp, fire camp, and placements, and juvenile hall, and all that stuff. YA was the final step.
Like, you're not getting it.
YA,
We got to send you to children's jail,
And-
children prison.
Yeah, YA is. You can only go to YA for violent offenses. So the kids who were doing the murders, doing the robberies, the drive-by shootings, the most violent kids were the ones that was locked up in the California Youth Authority. So just imagine you lock all of these violent kids together. And as a kid, you're trying to impress your peers.
Yeah.
And then you grow up in this gang culture to where you're taught. The gang culture teaches us to be suicidal because it tells us to never deny what set we claim, even if somebody's holding a gun to us, even if it leads to us fighting or dying. The bravado, because that's what young boys do. Young boys want to be a part of something that's brave. You know, I like to analogize it to sometimes being involved in a game. Kids, it's easier than playing football. Like, a young boy wants to be a part of something. That's how you establish your manhood, whether you're playing sports, whether you're in the boys club or the Boy Scout, you know what I'm saying? Or a game.
And they all need that father figure too, right?
Yeah, of course. And when you don't have that, though, you got to look for it somewhere else. But every boy want that. You want that older male that you can look up to and emulate, and you want to be a part of something.
And accepted, right?
Yeah, accepted, a part of something. And so with that, a lot of times, what's the easiest thing to be a part of? A game. Mm-hmm. If you want to be accepted on a football team, you got to work out. You got to practice. You got to be there on time. You got to be punctual. You don't need that to be a part of a game. And so it's something that became easy. And when you don't have a strong male to push you to do the most complicated thing, like be a part of the football team, be at practice, be there on time, do your workout, then
get
you
good grades, right? All that stuff.
Yeah, you become lackadaisical, and then you become angry and frustrated, so you easily fall off into the easiest thing to join, which is the game. So now you take all of them frustrated, angry, violent kids who are crying out and who have a point to prove, and you lock all of us inside of this facility together.
And you think it's going to help and rehab these kids.
It's not.
They have to come out worse than when they came in.
Yeah, you tend to come out worse than how you went in. And it's the psychological damage that the California Youth Authority does, because it creates more anger. And the anger is a result of sadness, because now you've taken this kid out of society and you placed him in this lockdown environment where he spends a lot of time in cells, sometimes solitary confinement. He doesn't have family. There's no women now, so the tenderness that might have come to nurture him is gone now. And so just imagine the psychological trauma that California Youth Authority can do.
This is the complete opposite of what a teenager or a kid in that puberty age needs, right?
Yeah.
So you said 14 to 17. So critical develop social years are kind of stripped away from you at the YA. What happens at 17? You get out.
Well, no, I didn't get out till I was like 19.
19, sorry. Yeah. 14 to 19.
Yeah.
What's going on now?
Got out. Didn't stay out too long. Went back for selling crack, for a small piece of crack and
now
a
you're
firearm.
An adult, right?
Yeah. And I went in for 6 years and 3 months.
For a small piece of crack and a firearm.
Yeah.
So at this point, you did 5 years in YA. You did 6 years in prison, state prison. What is your mindset at this point? Like, what is going through your mind? Like, man, I don't want to come back, or I'm not really tripping. Like, you know, like, what's going on?
This is my life.
After the 6 or during the 6?
After, during, I'm more so thinking, you know, during this time. After the 5 years, you just now doing 6 years. So while you're in, preparing yourself to come home, because, you know, you have a date. So at some point, you're mentally preparing for, you know, your release. What is your mindset like? Man, I'm not trying to do this anymore. Or because of why you're desensitized to doing time, and it's just a bid.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that YA does. When you go that young, So imagine this. Imagine being 25 years old and going to prison for the first time. It'll be shocking. But if you grew up in in prison, when you go back, it's like
Nothing.
this is second home. Sometimes it becomes first home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an easy walk. You know everybody. You know how to move. You know what I'm saying? You've proven yourself in YA. You put in your work. You got a little reputation. So you looked up to. You know, people admire you. People respect you. So it's a lot easier. So it's easier for you to just it exists in prison if you grew up spending your younger years in prison.
It's your lifestyle.
Yeah.
That's all you know. So you're not thinking, I'm going to get out of here. I'm done with this lifestyle at this point in your life.
Nah. And when I was in YA, no. In YA, you thinking of how you can become a better criminal.
I heard that a lot.
The complete opposite of what YA exists for, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're thinking of how you can get out and be a better drug dealer or a better gang member. That's what the California Youth Authority was. It was a school for making you a better
Criminal. Yeah. So you did the 5 years in YA. You did the 6 years in state prison. Now you out on the street again. What's going on?
What age are you? So
After-
YA, 6 years. How old are you now, too?
After the 6 years, I was 27. And this is when I started, like, I had a different perception now, because when I was in prison at that time, you know, you start reading.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times books are our first experience outside of the hood. It's cold. I just got over this cold. This shit
You
messing
all
with me.
No,
But,
you're good.
books is the first time we actually leave the hood and see something different. So at this time, I had a different perception about what the world was what the world actually looked like. You know, it didn't just look like what I grew up in anymore. So there was more out there. And deep down inside, I knew that I deserved more, right? So I told myself that I would never commit violent crime. I would never inflict any pain on anyone intentionally.
This came because of reading.
And just understanding that my lifestyle that I was living was not the right lifestyle, that it was abnormal. That's not how civilized people live, you know, and that, because for some reason, when you grow up in that environment and all you see is violent, and you see it, in particular, you see in your community that black on black violence and gangs, and then you look at TV and you see the same thing when you see yourself as a black person. You don't see too much. Back then, I don't know, TV in the 80s didn't depict too many positive imagery of black people. Mm-hmm. So just imagine, as a little kid trying to find an identity, you tend to think that your identity exists as something that's naturally violent or naturally criminal. You know,
That's good. That's
you
good
know,
insight.
I didn't see black doctors or black lawyers. And so there were times as a kid where I would question myself, like, damn, is it black people? Are we not meant to be lawyers and doctors?
Are we just bad people?
Yeah. And so it's not until you get to prison and you start reading and learning that it is more to, as a young black man, like, we have it extremely hard trying to find our identity here in the United States. It's extremely hard, and especially when we don't have a father figure, a strong father figure, or a positive role model there to guide us. is kind of hard. And so I had a lot of them questions as a kid, like what was my identity? And I think that's what made me even more criminal as a kid, because out of the frustration and anger and sadness and not knowing what to do or what my purpose in life was, it made me easily veer off to doing the things that was readily available to me in my community. And in all actuality, I was just being a victim of those circumstances because I was becoming somebody who I really wasn't.
Yeah.
And I think once I started reading and realizing that it was more out there for me as a young black person, that I started becoming more conscious and realizing that, you know, this lifestyle is not really for me.
Is there any books in particular you read that were pivotal or life-changing for you?
Yeah, the main book that I always, that was really pivotal for me was The Miseducation of the Negro. It was a very eye-opening book that made me realize that I was acting in a way that was more detrimental to who I'm supposed to be than who I really am.
So you said 6 years, you started reading, and your whole mindset changed. The mindset that you would never hurt another person again if you didn't have to.
Yeah.
So now that you're out after 6 years, what is going on?
You know, money.
Gotta have it.
Yes, like you get out, and I started feeling the impact of not being able to take care of myself, and so I started selling marijuana.
Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal. You know, oh, it's weed, it's marijuana. But you selling marijuana led you to prison again.
Yeah.
Because you're already a felon, correct? So that's why it's more harsh.
Yeah.
So what happens? You come out, you're broke, you're trying to survive. You're not hurting anyone. You're not violent. You're not even selling crack cocaine.
Nah.
You ain't selling hard drugs
Yeah,
at all.
you're
You
not selling
selling
hard
weed.
drugs.
I was scared. I wouldn't sell crack, and I was like, it wasn't scared. I was just turned off on it
Right.
because when
You
I was
see
in
what it
prison,
does.
one of my sisters started using crack. And so that's the time when it really hits you. You start realizing, you see the impact that it does. And so I'm like, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be a part of selling something that really just destroys people. Because as a kid, when I was selling it, I didn't see that. It's like all you see is the money and the good things from it. You don't even pay attention to the harm it causes. You just see that money's coming in. You're doing good. You're making money. You're eating. Your family's living off of it. That's all you see. You don't see that for you to live like that, that some other families are being destroyed.
Ruining other people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So once you start seeing that, once I started seeing that, I'm like, I don't want to be a part of that. Because at this time now, I'm more conscious and I'm more aware in life, and I'm aware of how my actions affect other people, and I'm living accordingly. Like I'm living according to the way that I want people to treat me. Like I want to live in a way that does good for people rather than cause harm to people. And so I didn't want anything to do with crack.
So you selling weed.
Yeah.
How does selling weed send you back to prison?
The feds.
The feds. So this got to be more than just a couple zips, a couple ounces. It's got to be a little bit more than that then, huh?
Yeah, it was a reverse thing. I went to go pick it up, got arrested. So it was really attempting to possess marijuana. And feds, war on drugs, that's a life sentence. Marijuana.
So you got a life sentence.
Well, I got 35 years.
Which might as well be a life sentence.
Which was essentially a life sentence.
25
How
or
do you
more.
feel? You're, 28 at this point?
Yep, 28.
28. You're out of prison. You're doing something which we all can consider more minor, which even in California, it's legal now. You're doing something like selling marijuana, and boom, 35 years. What's going through your mind as a 28-year-old?
It's not that. That's not even the thing. The 35 years was a small part of it. The big thing was that when I got arrested, I found out that my ex-girlfriend was pregnant.
Mm.
So 3 weeks earlier, my first and only child was conceived, unbeknownst to me.
Wow.
And so at the time that I'm getting arrested, I find out that I got a child on the way.
And you're never going to get to see them in their childhood.
Yeah, and it's not even so much about seeing, because that's for my own pleasure. But it's about being there for.
Yeah.
Because now you're sitting in that cell and you start reliving. You start seeing everything that you've been through. You relive everything you've been through as a child. Well, let me speak for me. I'm reliving everything that I've lived as a child. And the absence of having a father is really powerful. And then for me to be somebody who's now conscious, and I know one of the big problems in communities like mine, because we go back to what we said, peer pressure without a strong male to lead you through that peer pressure, you pretty much set that child up for failure.
So you're consciously aware that your actions are not going to affect your child's life forever.
Yeah, so it's like I'm bringing a child in this world and I'm setting that child up for failure because I'm not going to be there for that child. So now just put that on a scale of moral or morale. Put that on a scale of morale. When you bring a child into this world, a black child, knowing all of the odds against that child, that could be another young black boy like me growing up in that same community that I grew up, faced with the same peer pressure, the same violence, gangs, poverty, and I'm not there to be there for that child. I can't be there for that child. That's like, that makes me like one of the worst human beings on earth. And so now I'm looking at the rest of my life in prison, and what is my legacy? I brought a child in this world and can't be there for that child. That's my legacy. That's who I am. That's who I'm finna die being, the guy who couldn't even be there for his child.
And your child might end up just another statistic of
my child being in the same cell that I was in.
So the realization of you becoming a father for the very first time and then getting arrested, doing 35 years in prison, obviously was sobering, terrifying, a bunch of emotions going on. So what happens? What do you do about it?
I decided I was going to break out of prison. And so smuggled a hacksaw blade inside the prison, cut the bars out of a window, and was about to escape. Another prisoner snitched on me.
How do you smuggle a hacksaw into prison?
There's plenty of ways.
There's ways. We ain't gonna talk about that.
Just know. I know there's ways. I know there's ways.
So you get caught, and I'm assuming they take you to the hole.
Yeah, I was placed in a hole.
Right.
When I was in the hole, I smuggled another hacksaw blade inside the prison and cut a hole in the ceiling, got into the attic, and was escaping one night and got caught. Some cops caught me. They were outside smoking cigarettes at the time that I kicked an exhaust vent out.
So, two hacksaw blades.
Bad timing.
Two hacksaw blades. Man. First one, you got a little further this time, but man,
yeah.
I mean, this has to be heartbreaking for you because you tried 2 times, and so do you just give up? What do you do?
No, I didn't give up. I mean, it was heartbreaking the first time and the second time. It was especially the second time because just when you're out there, you feel that fresh air. You know, I've especially been in solitary.
Yeah.
And you could just feel that fresh air. And it was nighttime. You never seen, I didn't see daytime or nighttime.
Right.
not in that little box, no windows in that cell. And so it was just to be out there at night and feel that cool air, of course. It was like being free for a moment. So that was definitely heartbreaking. But I was determined because you had two things that depended on this, my child and my legacy. And I think those are two reasons for any man to fight and die for. So I was in this state of mind to where I was going to get free or die trying.
So we got another saw, attempt number 3.
Yeah, so after that, the United States Marshals, by this time, they know that I'm just determined. I'm trying everything that I can to get out of prison without hurting anybody, though, because I'm still standing true to that. I'm not going to hurt anybody in the process of me trying to free myself, because that'd be everything counterproductive, counter everything that I'm standing for. So they transferred me to a maximum security detention center, locked me in a cell 24 hours a day. And inside this cell, they had a camera in it to watch me, make sure that I couldn't try to escape again. I couldn't come out the cell for anything. But I escaped from that cell in that prison, and I got away.
Oh, Houdini over here. So how does this happen? I mean,
please tell.
Security camera in the cell 24 hours a day. Your life's in the cell. What happens?
Yeah, and that's what they started calling me, what you just said. They started calling me Houdini after that. I was on the news. They made a big deal about it. Everybody was blown away. It was one of the most ingenious prison breaks. So I got a little notoriety based on that escape. When I was captured, it was pretty ingenious. Like retraction devices. I had a 60 feet up rope retraction device. As I run away from the prison, the rope pulled back up into the vents.
I mean, they're actually making a movie about it, correct?
Yeah.
So
actually finished production on the movie.
So we won't go into too many of the details of how you got out. We're going to wait to
Don't
see that in
movie.
theaters.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see that.
Actually, there's a documentary about that.
What's it called?
It's called Breakout.
Breakout?
Yeah, you can see it on my website, QuanteBoscoAdams.com.
Okay.
Bosco.
I'm going after this. Yes. I want to hear about that. How long were you out for? Let's talk
I
about
didn't stay out too long, but I'm gonna let you guys. I don't want to spoil it. I want you guys to, when everybody watch that documentary, because it's pretty riveting. Yeah, right. Very exciting documentary.
Okay, I'm just gonna ask broad questions. You're out. What are you thinking? Because you weren't out for a long time. Were you think I finally did it? I'm done.
No.
It was a good feeling though.
Yeah.
Like just the moment that I was driving away from that prison and I got away, it was one of the best feelings in the world.
How do they find you?
You gotta watch the
There you go. There you
go. All right, there you go. I like this,
you
man.
good at this.
Okay, well, now you're back in prison.
So I was captured. And they took me to the court building, and the head marshal was there, and it was like, "What do we do with him next?"
Yeah, are you now handcuffed to a security guard 24/7?
And they was like, they didn't know what to do with me. They got a court order from a judge to after that they started locking me inside of, how when you get arrested at the police station, and you have the police, their desk there, and they're all right there.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I would be locked in a cell. There was one jail, they locked me right there in that little holding cell right there with the camera in it, and all the cops are right there.
Wow,
It's just
like you better not take your eyes off of him. If you blink, he will disappear.
Yeah.
So third time was success. Is there
more
attempts after?
Yeah, there was more. There was another attempt after that.
Can't hold this guy down.
It was even more. It was more ingenious than that one. And they ended up transferring me before I can execute it. I had a hole inside they would take me to a shower, and every day in that shower, I would work at this corner in the shower. I ended up getting up in the attic. I was ready to go. And they ended up transferring me to another prison. And I think like 3 months later, they discovered the hole.
They're like, you had to do it.
Yeah.
So you're sitting here with us right now. And obviously, hopefully, you didn't break out to get here. You know,
Getting us all in trouble right now.
I'm hoping I don't want no more codependence. So how did you get out this time?
So it's crazy. So after that third escape, the National Geographic Channel produced and aired this documentary about it called Breakout. So they aired it all around the world. And people started writing me. They would say I was smart. And they were touched by my story. And so after that, I started, I wanted to explain to people who I really was, because it seemed like it was an anomaly for somebody to come from a community like I had, who dropped out of school at the age of 13, to be ingenious or intelligent enough to pull off such a prison break. So I wrote a book just to kind of explain how someone like me could be dumb but so smart. You know what I'm saying? And the book, I talked about my childhood and how I got arrested and was trying to break out of prison. And I titled the book Chasing Freedom. And because I realized, like, even as a kid, when you're selling drugs, all of this was trying to be free. You're chasing something. You're trying to fulfill a void somewhere within inside. I thought that if I can sell drugs and make money and move out of the hood, then I can be free. If I can break out of prison, then I can be free. And as I'm writing this book, I realized that I started experiencing freedom, even though I was in solitary, just from writing my story, being vulnerable and expressing who I am, giving myself to the world in a way that can potentially change the lives of other people. I felt free. So I titled the book Chasing Freedom, and I spelled it D-U-M, freedom, because I realized, like, all my life I've been chasing freedom the wrong way. Freedom is something you find within inside yourself. Once you find your meaning and purpose in life and you start living it for the sake of humanity, then you're free no matter where you are.
Untouchable, right?
Yeah, and I found freedom in that prison cell. And so, meanwhile, I self-published that book. And meanwhile, I started doing things that was people would consider to be smart. And I quit trying to escape. And I started studying the law. And I became a jailhouse lawyer. Got several other people out of prison.
Wow.
And ultimately, I fired my attorney representing myself and got myself out of prison 19 years early. Got out.
Real quick, just an observation. I love that. One of the things I love about the Post P Chronicles is we hear stories like, oh, Will's just a murderer. This guy's trying to escape prison. What a terrible person, right? But when you bring the human element, the story behind it, chasing freedom, this guy wants to be a responsible dad and has cared about his legacy. Yeah. That's why he did it. He's not just some maniac that hates being in prison and wants to get out. He's chasing a deeper purpose in life, and that stuff just amazes me, and why I love this podcast and these stories, because we can just sit here and say all these guys are bad, right? You're over here explaining how you got freedom, how you have a legacy, how you became a jailhouse lawyer, all for the bigger purpose of what you now know your life is for.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's freedom.
Exactly.
I found freedom in that process of losing. Yeah.
So, jailhouse lawyer, studied up, got yourself out 19 years earlier. What was the, how did you get out 19 years earlier? What was your case? What was your, maybe a loophole, or what did you find that led to 19 years early?
It was the compassionate release statute. It's, the federal law. I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with federal law. It can be kind of complicated. But when the feds did away with parole in 84, they had a clause. They enacted another statute, which is called compassionate release statute, where in order for people who were sick and dying to not die in prison, they allowed the Federal Bureau of Prisons to file a motion to the court to have that prisoner released early. And they call it compassionate release. The Federal Bureau of Prisons rarely filed such motion. I think they filed maybe like 12 a year. And in each case, the prisoner died within weeks after being granted compassionate release. And there were 4 criteria that had to be met in order for the Federal Bureau of Prisons to successfully file one of these motions. And one of them was that the prisoner was terminally ill and dying, or the prisoner was terminally ill and couldn't take care of himself. The prisoner was the parent of a child and the other parent was incapacitated to where that parent couldn't take care of the child. And the 4th reason was any other reason deemed appropriate by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. But in all cases, the Federal Bureau of Prisons had to be the one to file a motion and approve it in order for it to go on to the courts. I didn't fit any of them. But in 2018, Congress amended that statute and said that if the court or if the Federal Bureau of Prisons refused to file such a motion, the defendant can file it himself. The prisoner can file it himself. Before, that didn't exist. You would have to ask the Federal Bureau of Prisons to file a motion, and if they said no, then you were dead. So now, there I was armed with the ability to ask the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and if they denied, then I can go straight to the court myself. But there was still an issue because those 4 criterion still require the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Because the first 2, you had to be sick or dying. Mm-hmm. And the 3rd one, you had to, have a minor child and the other parent was incapacitated, and that would never work. Nobody would ever let a person out of prison because of that. But that 4th one was any other reason deemed appropriate by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And so the argument that came about, and which exists now in the federal system, is that since there's a conflict there, if I can go to the court directly, then why must this criteria also require the Federal Bureau of Prisons? So that contradicts, right? So now courts interpret that to mean that any other reason deemed appropriate by the judge. And that was my argument, was that this conflict right here, anytime you have a conflict in the law, it's up for the judge to, to decide what it means. Any ambiguity in the law, the judge is going to decide what it means. And so my argument was that my judge had the ability to grant compassionate release without the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and that she can do so under any reason deemed appropriate by her. And the reasons that I used was that I was in prison for marijuana, which was now becoming legal in many states, even though it was still illegal in the feds. Yeah. Many states had decriminalized marijuana. I had a movie coming out about me. My daughter was still a teenager who needed me, and, different other things I had been doing in prison because I became more of a mentor inside the prison.
Almost a public figure at this point.
Yeah. And the judge agreed and reduced my sentence to time served and let me out.
Wow.
So that's nothing short of amazing.
Wow.
But that is almost like only half the story, because now that you've been out, man, your life just seems like a dream at times. And that's just for me hearing it.
Oh, yeah.
That's just from here, so I could just imagine how it is for you experiencing it. So why don't you tell us some of that?
Yeah, so I got out, instantly hit the ground.
2020?
Got out July 2020 during the pandemic. Got out, got full custody of my daughter.
Congratulations.
Started producing the movie. Got A-list cast involved in the movie. Wrapped up production in that. I've been producing a documentary series about my life also. Putting together a soundtrack. Got some good artists involved. Big names with for the movie. Nonprofit foundation. I've been got my own nonprofit, Chasing Freedom Foundation. Also sit on the board of the ICANN Foundation, which is another youth foundation, which my cousin actually runs. Yeah, I've been doing a lot.
It's amazing.
What's this right here you got on?
Oh, this is my guy. This Bink. Y'all gonna hear about this too. This this my guy in Alabama, athletic apparel. You know, black and long. It's nice. He got some nice stuff. Bink.
It's cool to hear. You know, it's funny you've used the term ingenious a few times, but I think it's pure genius.
Pure
You know,
I'll check you out over
you don't
here.
you don't see guys successfully escape from prison. You don't see guys become their
Jailhouse
own
lawyers,
lawyers,
yeah.
jailhouse lawyers, getting guys out and then represent themselves. And for you, you're just living a bigger purpose. You know, that's what I love to see. I
Yeah.
love guys when they get to walk in their purpose. And a lot of guys that came from your circumstances, right? They're probably still in prison and never getting out. And they don't know what their purpose is. But you, despite against all the odds, the upbringing, the lack of a father, the crime, the drugs, you found your purpose in there. And now that you found your purpose, the other, you know, shiny things don't matter anymore. It's not about the money. It's not about the clout. It's not about the attention. It's about, I got a purpose and now I can help people. So I'm going to use this platform I've been given to help as many people as possible. And it's just, that's awesome.
And that's
Genius.
That's the joy. That's the
Pure
joy in
genius.
life.
Yeah.
And when they say that's pure joy, when you find what your meaning and purpose in life is and you can fulfill it, I mean, I don't think there's a greater feeling.
There was one of our first guests, Big Adam.
Big Adam.
Big Adam, he said, purpose over pleasure, then find pleasure in your purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Sounds like that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you dropped a number of jewels on us today. A number of jewels.
Well, yeah.
But is there anything else you want to say?
I mean, I got a lot more I would like to say, but I can't say it all.
Right now, if you're talking to a kid growing up just how you grew up, who doesn't have that father figure, who doesn't have that male to look up to, and maybe he may be scrolling through YouTube or, you know, checking out on Spotify and he hears something and he sees you sitting right there going through the same things that he went through, what would you tell him?
Look at 10 years ahead. Don't look at, I think a big problem as a kid who doesn't have that is we can't see 10 years ahead. If we can see 10 years ahead and tell ourselves where we want to be 10 years from today. If I'm 14, 13, 12, where do I want to be at 25? Because if I can tell myself where I want to be at 25 and I'm 12, that means I got 13 years to get there. I don't have to be in a rush to get there. What happens today is insignificant to where I'm going to be. What happens to me today does not define who I'm going to be at 25. It's how I respond to what happens to me today that's going to decide whether I'm going to be the person I want to be at 25. So I think it's just about getting outside of that environment. That's one thing. Leave the hood. Get out there. Even if you get out there for one day and see something different, pick up books. Read literary information that isn't pretty much focused on your demographics. Step into other people's world. That's how you expand your own mind. And you'll be able to find out who you're really supposed to be. Because if I'm only narrowed to what's given to me, I may never find who I am in that piece of information. So expand, get out there, see more any way you can. And I think that's the good thing about the internet now is that you can actually leave the confines of your environment by going online and reading about other cultures and other places. And you might find something there that helps identify who you're supposed to be.
Right.
And now you have 10, 12, 13 years to get
figure it
there.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Last, one more question that's curious for me, because one of your purpose and was your legacy in your relationship with your child. You got full custody of your daughter.
Yeah.
How's that going now?
It's good. She just turned 18.
Hey.
So we
You guys
super
close?
Yeah, we're
Good
super
terms?
close. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I want to know. I'm like, that's what he was
Yeah.
doing all this
Yeah.
for. I hope it worked out.
Oh, no, it worked out to the
Because, you know,
best, yeah.
sometimes the children, when their parents go to prison, gotta, you know, beef with their parents and resentment and anger because
Yeah,
they were abandoned.
I think that's natural, but I think you just got to put in the extra overtime and put in the extra work to prove that you're going to be there for the child. Because that fear of abandonment is going to be real. And yeah, my daughter had that extremely.
Yeah. Well, real quick, how can you got websites, you got social media, name them all off for us. How can someone contact you?
My Instagram is Quante Bosco. That's QUAWNTAYBOSCO. My website is QuanteBoscoAdams.com. And you can find everything pretty much there at that website there.
Well, we appreciate you coming through, man, and dropping these jewels on us, man, telling us this incredible story. We'll be looking out for that movie
Yeah.
on these couple tickets. You know,
I'm watching that documentary tonight.
we watching that tonight, man.
Yeah, you can go to my website and see that documentary about me breaking out of prison.
Definitely.
Morgan Freeman just wrapped up production on a documentary about me breaking out too. It's
Wow.
gonna come out in
The
January.
real life, what's the guy's name in Shawshank
Shawshank.
Redemption?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's probably why he did. That was good.
Yeah, because he was the main character in that.
Yeah.
he has some things where he calls The Great Escape.
Mm.
He just did one on me.
It's awesome.
Once again, man, we appreciate you coming through. Appreciate you sharing your story. Looking forward to everything you have going on ahead of you. And man, we know the sky is the limit, man. It feels real good to be in your presence right now, brother. You know what I'm saying? Definitely. So once again, my name is Will,
And I'm Steven.
and this is the Post P Chronicles.